All right, now a former defense industry technician, Mark McCandlish, will speak with us now.
Good evening. I've got an awful lot of technical information that I want to share with you so you can try to understand what these substances that are being put into the environment do, how they work, where they came from, how the process was developed. Now, when we talk about aluminum, we talk about barium, we talk about strontium, these are actually kinds of metals. Aluminum oxide in particular is an oxide of aluminum that contains 2 atoms of aluminum and 3 atoms of oxygen. So if you break these particles down to the smallest size you can in a nanoparticle form, you can literally put this material in the jet fuel, and it will actually enhance the combustion process, because as the aluminum is vaporized along with the fuel, it releases all of the oxygen, so you get a much cleaner burn. Although the problem is that the aluminum comes out of the exhaust pipe, condenses, and then comes down to the ground. But this process also allows to put the aluminum into the environment as condensation nuclei that then help to promote different processes for modifying the weather. Now, where did this come from? Some of this technology actually came out of the stealth program. Now, the reason I say this is because stealth is about, particularly if you're talking about radar and aircraft, stealth was the idea that you would try to reduce the amount of radar energy that would be reflected off of an aircraft. When it's transmitted from the ground, it hits the aircraft, it reflects the signal back. The antenna that's with that system can then see the plane, track it, shoot it down. So the idea is if you want to reduce the radar cross-section, the RCS of the aircraft, reduce its visibility on radar, you could put particles of metal into the paint itself. It was originally called iron ball paint, but they weren't actually balls of iron. But these particles would then absorb the energy, principally because the particles were tuned. They were all a uniform size, sizes that we knew would resonate at the same frequencies that the radar of the Russians and the Chinese were using in their weapon systems. So if you put these particles into the paint, they absorb the microwave energy and they convert it to heat. Now, if you take these same particles and you spray them in the air, and then you broadcast a microwave frequency into the air, you can cause those particles to heat up. Now, if you take a single chunk of aluminum, say like this, and you break it up into something that's the size of a nanoparticle, say 40 nanometers across, 40 billionths of a meter, you'd be able to create billions and billions of particles of aluminum from something this small. You could fill this entire room with a haze that you could see. But if you put that up into the air and then you broadcast a signal that is tuned to the exact frequency that matches the size, and this is the key, all of these particles are the same exact size, so they respond to a specific frequency. So when you transmit this frequency, you can get all those particles to heat up. And because this item here has a relatively small surface area, you can magnify the surface area of this one object by billions of times by virtue of the fact that you've turned it into countless little balls of metal. So those little particles of metal that are in the atmosphere then magnify the amount of energy that they receive in the form of a microwave transmission. So you can heat up a mass of air, and if that mass of air has moisture in it, any kind of humidity at all, it all rises and expands. So this is how you can actually generate a weather system. This is how you can generate a powerful low-pressure system. In fact, the convection cells, the updraft of the air in these engineered systems are so powerful that they can produce hailstones that are the size of baseballs. Now, you may wonder, how is that possible? Usually when moisture is lofted into higher altitudes where it's much colder, the water begins to freeze and it begins to fall. And as it falls, you have other little particles of moisture that cling to it and they continue to freeze. It gets larger and larger. You get what looks like little droplets of water that are frozen. These little droplets can then be lofted again because of these power convection cells, and each time it adds another layer of ice. And so these convection cells are so powerful that you can literally create layer upon layer. In fact, if you cut one of these hailstones open, it looks like an onion, layer upon layer. So you can imagine from a military standpoint the amount of damage that you can do to enemy equipment, to enemy infrastructure with hailstones the size of a baseball falling out of the sky. You can damage the wings of an aircraft so severely that it can't fly because it no longer has the proper aerodynamics. So there are lots of things that you can do from the standpoint of a weapon system or the weaponization of weather. One of the things that you have to understand too is that because metal is a conductor of electricity, if you put a lot of metal very evenly dispensed into the environment, the air conducts electricity much more powerfully. It's much more conductive, so you get more lightning strikes. The bad part of it is that when this material falls out of the atmosphere, particularly the aluminum oxide, it gets into the soil. It's literally small enough to be absorbed through the root structure of the plants, as I believe someone else said. And so you have something right in the plants that if it heats up in a forest fire, it causes a forest fire to burn much hotter. This is one of the reasons why I believe the forest fires we're having now are so much more severe. In fact, if you look at the statistics from the state of California, NOAA, CAL FIRE, you'll find that the suppression costs of forest fires have doubled in the last 10 to 15 years. And it's largely because of the materials that are being put into the environment. Thank you very much.